NC Pork, raising the bacon, raising the bar.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the David Glenn Show, now seen and heard exclusively here on the North Carolina Sports Network. Please find more of our audio, video, and articles at our website, ncsportsnetwork.com. On today's edition of the program, we will discuss our state's current place, a very prominent one, in the baseball universe. That includes where we stand right now in the Major League Baseball expansion discussion. Did you know that North Carolina is the most populous state in the USA that doesn't already have at least one MLB franchise? Including the news we broke at ncsportsnetwork.com more than a year ago that Carolina Hurricanes owner Tom Dundon is part of the movement to bring an MLB franchise to Raleigh, NC. Also, here's another Did You Know, since today's featured guest is the most knowledgeable person I know on things like college baseball, even Team USA baseball. Remember, that training complex is right here in Cary, North Carolina. Did you know that the state with the most bids to the NCAA baseball championship over the last 3 years combined is, you guessed it, North Carolina with 20. Wake Forest ended up making the College World Series in 2023. NC State and UNC advanced to Omaha in 2024. And here in 2025, we have 5 teams from the old North State trying to make that dream come true. It's the Tar Heels again, the Wolfpack again, the Deacons again, plus Duke and East Carolina, who also have been regular postseason participants in baseball in recent years. UNC just won another Atlantic Coast Conference title under our recent David Glenn Show guest, Scott Forbes, and ECU just won another American Athletic Conference championship under our many-time guest, Cliff Godwin, who has now taken the Pirates to baseball's big dance 9 times in his 10 full seasons in Greenville. The Pack, the Deacons, and the Devils are in the NCAA tournament this year as at-large invitations. With these things and much more in mind, we welcome in today's guest, who was one of the driving forces behind the David Glenn Show from about 2016 through 2020, and since then has become one of the great play-by-play voices of many sports across North Carolina and beyond. He is a lifelong baseball guy. He's a co-host of the popular ACC Baseball, Etc. podcast, and he's someone who, for the past decade or so, has become a beloved member of the extended Glenn family as well. Daron Vaught, welcome back to the David Glenn Show, my friend. How are you?
I'm good. It's Selection Monday, so it's like Christmas morning for me, and I could not be better. Doesn't mean I don't have my gripes with the field of 64 and the way that panned out, but it is overall a good day, DG.
Well, there's some Virginia fans in ACC country unhappy that the Cavaliers didn't get in. Of course, our focus today will be on the state of North Carolina and some other things, but let's start with a really broad picture question before we get to the college baseball stuff, which is the main reason for your visit today. Where do things stand with the possibility of North Carolina at some point getting its own franchise in Major League Baseball, which is the only top league we cover that has not expanded since the 1990s, but where Commissioner Rob Manfred, among others, has said that sport, that league, is probably ready to expand at some point, maybe by the end of the 2020s?
Yeah, potentially by then. And I think, as you might predict, it would be an expansion of 2 teams, one in the western part of the country, another in the eastern part of the country. You and I, including on old editions of the DG Show, have talked a lot about the geographical gap. There's a void that Major League Baseball is dying to get filled basically between Washington, D.C. and Atlanta, Georgia. That also includes Nashville, Tennessee. Um, there are obvious other suitors, but the favorite at this point, I think, would be Nashville on this side of the country with Tom Dundon and the Raleigh efforts improving month by month, it seems. Nashville's has just been in place and on firmer footing for longer in trying to get a ballpark approved. Music City Baseball is the name of that movement and group that's got some power to it. It's some big baseball people are behind that effort. The others would include, maybe a Portland out west would be included. Las Vegas, of course, has the A's now, so they're not, or they're planning on having the A's now, so they're not necessarily in this expansion universe, which is interesting because I think it's where a market like Raleigh would maybe best fit or best get in that there's been a lot of talk with the Tampa Bay Rays. I mean, they're playing at a minor league park as we speak for this major league season, struggling to get deals done for a new ballpark in the Tampa area. The Durham Bulls are the AAA affiliate, longtime partners of the Tampa Bay Rays. It would not be unheard of for the Rays to relocate to an area that is much closer to their AAA affiliate, as a lot of Major League Baseball teams have recently done, except, they move the AAA affiliate or acquire a AAA affiliate that's closer rather than moving the big league team. I I not that Raleigh is not a candidate for expansion. And we've seen this happen in other ways, right? Remember with Major League Soccer, while you and I were working on the show together, it
Yep.
was, oh, it's going to be Raleigh, it's going to be Raleigh, it's going to be Raleigh. And then David Tepper, Carolina Panthers owner, swoops in and gets the team in Charlotte instead. Those things can happen. So I'm not saying Raleigh is not fit or is not going to make a push and potentially become the expansion option in the eastern part of the United States. But if it is limited to just those two, maybe after a failed expansion bid and depending on the timing of an organization like the Tampa Bay Rays, I think Raleigh would be a really, really good fit to not expand but relocate a team. So that's where we stand now. Again, I think as of right now, if you were to put odds on it, it would be Nashville is the favorite with Raleigh kind of surging and hopefully contending, because I know you and I would both love to see a baseball team in North Carolina.
Daron Vaught is joining us here on the David Glenn Show. Turning to college baseball, before we even dive into the bracket that has been announced at this point, remind our viewers and readers and listeners where they can find your baseball specific stuff. Because among your special projects has been a really fun one with an international baseball star, but I know you produce regular content as well. For those who are all in on college baseball in particular, remind them on where they can find your stuff more regularly.
Yeah, both projects you're talking about are part of the D1 Baseball Podcast Network. So D1Baseball.com. Occasionally, you might even see me with a byline writing some stuff there. And wherever you get your podcasts, ACC Baseball, etc., is our weekly to twice weekly show. Danny Graves, the former Miami Hurricanes closer, Hurricanes Hall of Famer, and former Cincinnati Reds closer in the big leagues, went to a couple of All-Star games. He's in the Reds Hall of Fame as well. You see him now on ACC Network as he was at the studio coverage there at the desk at DBAP this past week. So Danny and I co-host ACC Baseball, etc. You just search it that way wherever you get your podcasts. Would love your support and for you to give us a try. And we like to consider ourselves. We do talk a lot of college baseball, specifically ACC baseball, obviously, but the etc. is there for a reason. And we do things such as we've got this thing called the Hall of Name, and it's basically word association. I look through every piece of Danny's career and I'll find a former teammate, like a Pedro Martinez, Ken Griffey Jr. These are guys that he brushed shoulders with and is friends with and communicates with even after his playing days. I'll just name someone like that, and he is tasked with just basically giving me whatever comes to mind. Word association, a story, an awkward encounter in an elevator, whatever comes up. So those turn out to be some pretty fun stories for baseball fans of all kinds.
Rintaro.
Yeah, yeah,
You got to just remind people of that because that's been one fun branch of your tree lately.
so Rentaro Sasaki played his freshman campaign as a member of the Stanford Cardinal this spring. Prior to, he was on campus last year, basically learning how to live as an American college student. He is maybe the most heralded baseball prospect in Japanese history. He has their career high school home runs record. He played at the same high school as Shohei Ohtani and Yusei Kikuchi of Major League fame. His father is the head coach of that team and is a legendary head coach. So his father coached those two big leaguers as well. And I did it's a six-part sort of investigative narrative podcast over on the D1 Baseball feed for that. You can actually, it's probably easier if you just Google D1 Baseball Rintaro because we have a landing page on the site where you've got access to all six and then a bonus seventh episode where I sat down with Rintaro and did a full interview in English when his Stanford Cardinal visited and played the North Carolina Tar Heels in Chapel Hill earlier this season. So yes, it's something I'm really proud of. Rentaro, part of the D1 Baseball Podcast Network. It is on the D1 Baseball Podcast feed. So if you go there to listen to the audio of it, you're going to have to do some digging. So yes, Google D1 Baseball Rintaro, Rintaro, and that'll be the best way to find it.
I mentioned the place of our state in the broader college baseball universe. Most bids to the big dance in baseball over the last 3 years combined. I think it was second most this year with the five that we're going to ask you to extrapolate on here in a second. And we'll go one by one. So whether you're a fan of the Pirates or the Pack or the Deeks or the Devils or the Heels, we will get to each of those. But the ACC still has a very prominent place as well in the college baseball universe. But the SEC seems to have just an insanely prominent place. I want to help folks understand and maybe myself understand this better. In our friendship over a decade or so, we've been used to the Southeastern Conference being the trend setter in college football. We've also seen, in part because of money issues and name, image, likeness, and the skyrocketing TV money that the Southeastern Conference schools now have at their disposal, we've seen in men's basketball, the SEC going from kind of a second tier league to last year, an incredible league, record number of NCAA men's basketball tournament bids. Of course, the Florida Gators end up being your national champion in men's hoops while representing that league as well. What's going on with college baseball? Because as long as I've been alive, that league has been good in college baseball. So I'm wondering whether this is just a continuation of a theme where the SEC just tied its own record all time. 8 of the 16 regionals for this tournament we're about to enjoy are SEC schools, and they have some even depth beyond that. Is this a reaction to the name, image, likeness, money-oriented world we're living in? Or is this simply the SEC in baseball being what it has been maybe for most of your lifetime?
I think it's both, and I think that's fair to say. I mean, the SEC is this is not what it has become in basketball because the history and the support for SEC baseball has always been there in ways that on a top to bottom basis has not been present for men's basketball, right? I mean, I think there are specific programs, of course, that ascend above that. But baseball support in the SEC has always been there. Now, you know as well as anybody, TV money is good and revenue sharing is at its best in the SEC and under the current collegiate athletics model. And because of both the support that baseball gets at these schools and the resources allotted to these athletic departments, it's just gone Super Saiyan. And yes, the NIL is a huge part of it. Um, but SEC baseball's always been great. It's always been incredible, and it is less of a reaction and more a it's a confluence of the two that has aided the SEC in becoming this super giant in college baseball in a way that you mentioned 16 regional hosts, eight of them are from the SEC. The ACC is far and away the second best, second biggest college baseball conference, and we've got
Three.
three. So just think about that for comparison's sake. And there was a Georgia Tech that maybe thought they were supposed to be in there, but even then, the ACC has half of what the SEC has,
Yeah.
at best case scenario. So that's just it speaks to the magnitude of SEC baseball and how great it is.
You mentioned earlier that you had some reactions as somebody who follows college baseball all day, every day. I have heard from Georgia Tech fans that they deserve to be a host. I have heard from Virginia fans that they deserve to be in the tournament, which they're not. I have heard from Carolina fans who have the number 5 seed nationally that they should have been one of the top 4 seeds. I'm not sure I totally understand why that's a huge deal. I know why being top 8 is insanely important. Obviously, you not only host the first weekend, but if you win, you automatically host the second weekend if you're top 8. So I don't know how much repercussion there is between, say, being a 3, 4, or 5 seed. But what were some of your most extreme reactions to maybe situations where some of the complaints are valid complaints?
I'll start with North Carolina. There's essentially no difference, right?
Okay.
You're aware of the format enough to know that top eight is if you're in that mix, you're hoping that you land one of those top eight seeds because not only do you host the regional, you are guaranteed that if you win the regional, you will host a super
So
regional against
home
the
games to the College World Series if you're
North
top
Carolina
eight,
is going to
right?
play at Boshemer Stadium until they get to Omaha or don't get to Omaha. That's the fact, right? And that's a huge deal for them because they've always played really well at home. In terms of being top 4, I think it mainly is a respect thing that is being combated right now. The top 4 national seeds all were named from the SEC.
Yeah.
It was not expected. Vanderbilt won the SEC tournament. Sure, right? The RPI makes sense. You put them up there. Texas has been for weeks now believed to have been maybe the number 1 seed, but Vanderbilt came in and won the conference tournament and jumped them in that way, right? Arkansas is a team that has, for much of the season, had the metrics necessary to be up there. I think it's maybe the most balanced team in the country and maybe would be my favorite going into the field of 64 to win the whole thing. The 4th team named was Auburn. And Auburn is a very good team. They are very high in the metrics mostly used in naming these seeds. Auburn's RPI rank is number 3. But Auburn finished the regular season standings 6th in the ACC. And I think ACC fans, when they saw that designation for Auburn, coming off the heels of last night when the regional host sites were announced and Georgia Tech's Atlanta location was not part of that. I think, and there's a fair, this feeling is fair if you're an ACC fan and you feel this way, that there appears to be a bit of a slight toward the conference in that the regular season championship, Georgia Tech won that, nor the conference tournament championship, UNC won that in dominating impressive fashion over another host, Clemson. It would appear that those don't really mean anything. And I think there are valid reasons for that. Like it would appear, based on Auburn being the 6th ranked SEC team, getting the number 4 national seed, that the conference standings don't really mean a lot. Again, I think there are fair reasons for that. But I think what North Carolina has done of late is far too impressive to allow the 6th best SEC team to jump them in the standings. And again, not that it makes a ton of difference. The opponents are going to vary based on where they are slotted. Um, but North Carolina is still in a good spot. The thing that we have to keep in mind is imbalanced scheduling, which has prior to the season not really been something to consider for the ACC, is now part of it. And there are valid reasons assigned to Georgia Tech not being named a top 16 national host. They evaded the other three best teams in the ACC regular season standings, right? Florida State, they didn't play them this year. North Carolina, they didn't play them this year. NC State, they did not play them this year. Against the top five, so Georgia Tech was one of the top five. Against the other four this season, Georgia Tech went 1-3 against the best teams in the ACC, not themselves. Now, there are conflicting ideas here, conflicting ideologies, right? So if you're going to put Auburn in the top four because the regular season standings don't quite matter, why does it matter that Georgia Tech didn't play these really good teams, right? You see what I'm saying? There's some nitpicking that you can do, and it happened in other places in the bracket that I could talk about, maybe non-ACC things. One in the Carolinas that stood out as a big deal to me, and this is maybe my biggest takeaway from the bracket, is Coastal Carolina only being the 13th seed. I thought they were for sure going to be number 8 and have a double hosting possibility in Conway. The Sun Belt's been an interesting conference. It's basically been them and 2 other teams at the top, and no one else is really that competitive. So Troy was a team that got snubbed, and I thought should have been in from the Sun Belt. There's issues there, but I overall there's not a lot that was egregious in this, right? Those are small gripes, I think, right? Georgia Tech hosting, their head coach, the legendary Danny Hall, is on his way out. This is his retirement tour, so to speak. So it would have been nice for them to host a regional. And then with North Carolina, not all that much changes. But I think there are some small indicators recognized by ACC fans that maybe there's some sliding going on.
In sports, we talk a lot about impact players who make a positive difference. When it comes to our state's economy, the North Carolina pork industry is a true MVP. Each year, the pork industry plays an important role in supporting rural communities across our state. It contributes more than $10 billion a year to the North Carolina economy and supports more than 44,000 jobs. Learn more about their positive impact at ncpork.org. The North Carolina Pork Council, the foundational partner of the North Carolina Sports Network. I am a better person and a more effective business owner for having known and learned from Emily Parks over many years now. Emily's company, Organize for Success, helps multi-passionate business owners and executives bring harmony to all the layers of their lives, from work to side projects, from friends and family to hobbies, community, and beyond. With Emily's help, you too can make every minute matter. She helps you determine what earns your time and how to efficiently accomplish what matters. One of the many things I love about Emily is that she does not impose her will on her clients. She listens to them. That way she can better help them cultivate the lives they want to live. You can set up a complimentary call with Emily today by visiting organizeforsuccess.com. Daron Vaught is joining us on the David Glenn Show. Make sure to check out his podcast as the co-host, ACC Baseball, etc., as he mentioned. Let's go to the North Carolina-based teams one by one. I'll give you a quick snapshot. We'll start with the high seed UNC. Here's my take, and then I want you to speak a lot longer than I do. But Scott Forbes, I've been following college baseball and UNC baseball since the late 1980s, Daron. You know that I even was a color commentator for UNC baseball while I was at UNC Law School in the 1990s. So I've known Scott Forbes for a long time, but this is now year 5 for him as a head coach. And my summary would be his first 3 years, He actually finished exactly 500 in conference play his first 3 years as a head coach. After, of course, many seasons as an assistant in Chapel Hill and kind of a pitching guru, among other things. Last year, he kicked the door down and had not only a great regular season record, but in the postseason, the Tar Heels go to the College World Series. This year's overall record is even better than last year's. And as you mentioned, they're the ACC tournament champion as well. They have the ACC pitcher of the year. They have all sorts of arms depth. They have a catcher who looks like he could be playing in Major League Baseball in the not too distant future. They have grit. They have grind. I don't know. Let me ask you this. What makes these Tar Heels so special, and get into the individual players as well? But do you believe it is the best of Scott Forbes' 5 teams as the head coach in Chapel Hill?
They certainly look like it. And this is a team that I got very deep into this season, not really believing in, because the offense had become a bit disenchanted with. They did not have the production in the first half of the season that would be typical of a player like Gavin Gallagher, who has erupted as one of their key contributors. In that championship game in the ACC tournament, he put 2 doubles off of the very top of the Big Blue Monster in left field. Luke Stevenson, you mentioned, has always been great, and he's steady, so he doesn't stand out as much when the rest of the lineup is not doing what they can. But it has turned into a very, very dangerous offense to go with the pitching that you alluded to. Jake Knapp is back another year. He's one of the old guys. He missed all of last year. Tommy John, he got injured, if you recall, about 2 weeks prior to the start of the season for North Carolina. And therefore, they had to bump up 2 freshmen, true freshmen, to the Friday, Saturday roles. Well, then the Friday guy got hurt for the year as well. So then comes Jason DeCaro, who shouldered the load as their de facto ace. And for much of the season, he was not yet 18 years old, but led them on a trip to Omaha, in addition to players who are now gone from the program, like a Vance Honeycutt, drafted in the first round and in the Baltimore Orioles organization. So it's a really good team. And Knapp's at the start of it. He has been dominant this year, an absolute bulldog on the mound. It's fastball slider. He's he's got the look of a North Carolina country boy, right? So he pitches how he looks and is as a person.
Big
it's
dude.
perfect.
Big
Perfectly
dude.
fitting. Perfectly fitting. Behind him now, you've got DeCaro in a
Yep.
second year with the program, with this drove of Omaha and postseason experience. And the depth has been there with a guy like Aiden Houck, who got significant time last year due to the injuries in the pitching staff. So he's been their reliable Sunday guy as well. And there's not as many teams in the country as you would think that have steady weekend rotations. So that in and of itself is huge for a team. Not to mention they've thrown as well as they have. In the bullpen, this is the interesting part for North Carolina. Since the beginning of the season, the bullpen efforts have been led mainly by 2 freshmen. And so here they are again, putting first-year college players in these big spots. Walker McDuffie, the bespectacled Walker McDuffie,
Yep.
who I mentioned Jason DeCaro pitching at 17 years old. Sometimes you might not believe that McDuffie's turned 16 yet, but it's real. It's a real arm. He's got an incredible slider, and he's been put in after spot all season long. The expectation has been, this is our closer. This is our leverage guy. He's been awesome. He's a North Carolina kid. His dream was to pitch at North Carolina. He's living it, and he's thriving in the moment. The other freshman arm for them is Ryan Lynch, who started that championship game, and they project to be a starter going forward in his career, but he's been one of those bullpen pieces, and he was incredible against Clemson. Tied his season.
Bases loaded, no outs, and ice water in his veins to get out of that.
at the end of his outing, DG, he was losing his stuff. We were saying in the press box in real time, he's not even throwing that 93 anymore. He's losing it. Like this just feels like maybe leaving a guy in too long. And then he slams the door, gets through his 4 innings, and that was a huge moment. I know the score got way more lopsided after that, but that felt like a huge pivotal moment. So he went well beyond his season high for pitches thrown by about 20 pitches. He tied his season high for innings pitched, but that was previously done on opening weekend against Texas Tech. The growth has been there for Lynch as well. And he's a totally different profile than McDuffie, which is part of the fun. You get different looks coming out of the bullpen. And they've got guys who are very, very formidable who don't even throw on a regular basis, it feels. So that blowout victory against Clemson got them the opportunity to get some of those guys work, whereas they otherwise wouldn't have it. The lineup it knows its role. I think that's the best thing about it. It doesn't have as much pop. It's not as dynamic as the team that was in Omaha last year. There is no Vance Honeycutt,
Right.
and there's never going to be again because he finished his career as the home run king for North Carolina baseball, a record that had stood for about 30 years. So they've pieced it together in ways with both incoming players and guys who were there through the trip to Omaha to kind of figure out who they are. And I think that was the cause for the holdup in the first half of the season. It was learning for a guy like their starting shortstop, Alex Madera. I'm not the second baseman 9-hole hitter anymore. I've got to play a little bit differently. I've got to expect things when I'm at the plate that are a bit more than what I expected last year, right? And he's really come into his own. Gavin Gallagher, people might remember from the regional last year, he had a walk-off home run for North Carolina at Boshamer Stadium in the postseason as a freshman. He was experiencing a little bit of a sophomore slump and now has come into form. A big piece for North Carolina this year was Scott Jackson, their longtime assistant coach, who left several years ago to become the head coach at Liberty, came back home, if you will, using my
And
air
brought a
quotes.
guy with him.
He came back home, and Scott Jackson is now the associate head coach at North Carolina. He brought his center fielder, Kane Kepley, who is the engine for this offense. Luke Stevenson's great. Luke Stevenson's going to be a first-round Major League draft pick as an eligible sophomore, and he's going to be playing in the bigs for a long, long time. There is no one in the ACC more big league ready than Luke Stevenson. Kane Kepley is the most important piece for this North Carolina lineup. He is their leadoff hitter. He is their leader in stolen bases. He is an incredible on-base guy. He gets hit a ton by pitches. He's just got a knack for it. And as he goes, the Tar Heels go. So they have, and if you watched any of the ACC championship, you learned this. Top to bottom of the lineup, they've got guys who can do a little bit of everything. They are selfless. They're not afraid to drop bunts when it is going to be best for the team. They have a collection of players who happen to be very skilled bunters, which feels like a throwback in college baseball today. And Hunter Stokely's another old guy. That's one name I'll mention left that I haven't yet. Hunter Stokely's another old guy. He missed most of last year for injury, just like their starting pitcher, Jake Knapp. He's benefited from that, I think. I get messages from people or have throughout the season like, man, imagine if they had Jake Knapp on last year's team. Imagine if they had Hunter Stokely and or Jake Knapp on last year's team. And there's validity to that, DG, right? I'm not dumb enough to think that another good piece would not have factored into the equation to a team that went to Omaha. But I think missing that time, yet experiencing that with their teammates, has enabled both of them to have the kinds of years that they're having it's a very emotionally driven kind of way. Again, I'm not saying a left-handed power bat would not have done North Carolina some good in Omaha, but it's an instance of, or a couple instances of, guys making the best of the circumstances and using it to get better. And I think that's what's happened with Jake Knapp and Hunter Stokely. I like this North Carolina team a lot and could talk a lot more about them, but that's kind of my synopsis.
Last year, we not only had 7 teams from the great state of North Carolina make it. I remember the Heels hosted a regional, the Wolfpack hosted a regional, the Pirates hosted a regional. So we were kind of in college baseball heaven. It is a little different this year. We mentioned the Tar Heels, and I'll just add quickly that the 3 teams headed to Chapel Hill to battle against Carolina are Holy Cross, Nebraska, and Oklahoma. But the other 4 in-state teams that are headed into this big tournament are all on the road now. So let's hit those 4. NC State, we've known Elliott Avent for 3 decades at this point. I think this is his 22nd trip with the Wolfpack into the NCAA tournament, 3 trips to the College World Series, including 2 of the past 4 years. What makes the Wolfpack special this year? And what do you think of the Pack's chances as they head to Auburn, which is that number 4 national seed, as you mentioned earlier?
NC State is a great pitching team, and there are some familiar faces in that. Dominic Fritton is their ace. He experienced an incredible freshman season 2 years ago, freshman All-American by basically every outlet that gives such awards. A little bit of a sophomore slump, but still was a big piece of a team that went to Omaha last year. He has found his form, his best form again. And in fact, he's really hiked up his prospects to be drafted and get to the next level and be somebody that an organization says, okay, we think you could be our next big league pitcher. He's been incredible. Ryan Marone has had a great season as a left-handed starter, crafty guy for them. He was more of their midweek guy last year. The pitching is great. Jacob Duden out of the bullpen. They've had some others who have emerged as better bullpen candidates, even though Jacob Duden by our team at D1 Baseball was ranked the top relief pitcher in college baseball coming into the season. He's not necessarily been the main guy on the back end for NC State. The lineup it's way different than it was last year. Last year they had guys like Alec Makarevich who transferred from East Carolina. Amac, while he was playing last year, was the active college baseball games played leader. He was literally the most experienced player in college baseball. You knew what you were getting when he stepped on campus in Raleigh, and he gave you that. And he led the team in basically every offensive category. You had homegrown guys like Jacob Cozart, Eli Serrano, who were big pieces of the lineup, but got drafted after their junior years. AMAC is part of a trend with the next couple of graduate seniors being injected into that lineup last year. Garrett Pennington came from Wichita State. Very experienced, very good. You knew exactly what you were getting. Brandon Butterworth is a little bit different of a story. He transferred as a graduate from Western Carolina, where he wasn't going to be the starting shortstop for the Catamounts, but earned his spot as a starting shortstop at NC State and came through in massive ways for the Wolfpack. But his experience is what you could probably argue enabled him to do that. This year, not a single graduate transfer. All the transfers that were added by Elliott Avent and his staff, sophomores, juniors. So if they don't get drafted, there's potential that they all have multiple years ahead as members of the Wolfpack. It's worked out. It has taken longer to work out. They had a stretch toward the beginning of the season where they lost 5 consecutive games, including 3 in Jacksonville at the Jacks Classic, where I was on the call, and it did not look good. They were preseason ranked 12th, I believe, and they took a long, long time to eventually get back up to that ranking. So they've found themselves in a big way. They've got a true freshman center fielder, Ty Head, highly regarded by scouts coming into the season, and has really emerged as a solid player for them. Justin DeCrisio is a shortstop for them that I happen to really like. He's an all-world defender. He's come around as a big time bat for them. He just takes mature plate appearances. Trot Nixon's son, Luke Nixon, back for another year as a
Yeah.
freshman last year. He's a natural infielder, but because of injuries and just needing to get him in the lineup on their way to Omaha last year, he was thrust into the outfield. And it is very unnatural to him, but he played admirably in the outfield, had some big spots in the postseason, and was big for them. So now he's able to be himself as an infielder for this Wolfpack team, hits at the top of the lineup, has been a big piece of their success. Uh, Alex Sosa is a highly touted prospect catcher for them who spent the summer with Team USA, sort of um, in a sudden manner. He got called while he was out fishing on the lake
Yeah.
to be sort of a late fill-in as a catcher for Team USA over the summer, and he relished that experience, got off to a slow start, and he's come on strong. So the Wolfpack, look, man, like you can never count out an Elliott Avent team, even when they struggled at the beginning of the season. There was a universal sense in the college baseball world that okay, they're gonna figure it out. We don't quite know what it is yet, but they're gonna figure it out.
The Lawson Insurance Group in Raleigh is a family-owned business led by three actual brothers who happen to be huge sports fans: Ken Lawson, Miller Lawson, and Michael Lawson. I know these guys, I trust these guys, and I send these guys my own insurance business and that of my family. The next time you have insurance needs, I hope you'll do the same. The Lawson Insurance Group is known for its commitment to community and its dedication to ensuring that North Carolinians and their businesses are prepared for life's inevitable challenges, with the reminder that as a high street insurance partner, Lawson Insurance Group offers local expertise and support that, combined with High Street's extensive national resources, means more choice and support for you as their client. To learn more, search Lawson Insurance Group online. The Lawson Insurance website will be the first link that pops up.
This segment brought to you by our great friends at Atlantic Tire and Service, where DG and his family take all of their vehicles for routine maintenance, service needs, and a world-class selection of new tires. Atlantic Tire and Service, your one-stop tire and auto repair provider with highly trained technicians and a sales and support staff that are second to none. They've grown to 6 Triangle area locations, 2 in Raleigh, 2 in Cary, 1 in Durham, and 1 in Wake Forest. You can learn more online at AtlanticTireOnline.com.
Daron Vaught joining us on the David Glenn Show. The Wolfpack at Auburn will be the number 2 seed. Again, Carolina, the 1 seed in Chapel Hill. Moving to another 2 seed, the Duke Blue Devils. You know how much I love to say this phrase, Daron. Before both you and I were born, Duke actually went to the College World Series. I don't get to apply that label too often because there is a slight age gap between you and me. But Duke was a baseball power for a time, 60 plus years ago. But they have not been back to the College World Series since then. Now, that said, Chris Pollard, the Duke head coach, joined our show during your time with me several times. I think, putting aside the COVID year, which of course there was no postseason, this is 7 times in 9 years under Chris Pollard that the Blue Devils are in the NCAA baseball championship. That qualifies after decades of a lot of up and down, and mostly down for Duke baseball. That qualifies as a resurgence for the Blue Devils on the diamond, no doubt about it. And he's been a good coach at multiple stops, including multiple just here in North Carolina. What's special about this year's Duke team? And then, eventually I'm going to ask you which of these 2 seeds, whether it's State or Wake or Duke, has a chance to throw an upset in this particular case, as the Wolfpack is heading to Auburn, and we got the Deacons headed to Tennessee. We'll talk about the Deeks a little bit later. It's the Duke Blue Devils headed to the number 7 overall seed, the Georgia Bulldogs, in Athens.
It's funny. When I think of our time together doing the show, we had a weekly spot with former Duke football coach David Cutcliffe,
Yes.
who did a similar turnaround with Duke
Yeah.
football. I compare the two sort of journeys for the
Yeah.
programs, and think of them to be very much aligned and very much they're very similar. What Chris Pollard has done there is nothing short of incredible. It's the reason why he's toward the top of any coaching candidate list when an SEC job or another ACC job or another appealing job comes up every year. So he renegotiated this past offseason after some flirtation with Miami as the Hurricanes had a head coaching opening and they courted him pretty hard. And he decided to stay at Duke and got some firmer commitments from the athletic department to upgrade the facilities, which is underway. They did part of it preseason, and more of it will be done once this season is over as well. And I guess maybe they'll get started on that right away since they're not going to be playing any more games at Jack Coombs Field. Um, I'm just eternally impressed with this program because of the agility, and I don't mean that as a physical attribute for its players, although they've got plenty of great athletes. This is a team in college baseball that maybe does a better job than anyone of when someone or something is not working in a certain place, they will fine tune it. They will finagle it. They will flip it around until it does. And they've done this year after year with a pitching staff that gets buy-in from everybody. A former pitcher, you can imagine this going into a season and not being named a starter or a reliever. You're just a pitcher.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to step up when you're needed by your team, right? It can be a little uncomfortable for big time recruits at this level. It can be unwanted, right? Maybe you want the certainty, the comfort of knowing what your role is as a pitcher. You want to be deemed with the label, weekend starter. You want to be the ace. You want to be the Sunday guy. That can be uncomfortable, but Pollard and his pitching coach, Brady Kirkpatrick, the rest of that coaching staff do an excellent job managing expectations with their guys. And as a result, they've not really had to weed anybody out, but you find out who wants to buy in and who wants to be a part of that. Sticking with a process, and it works. Like, look, this is a team I was very bullish on coming into the season. It just felt like it was time for Duke. I had them in my 8 for Omaha, and I think they're a contender. In addition to the great job that the coaching staff does year in and year out, they have superstars. AJ Gracia, a guy who, if you looked up a month ago, was hitting sub 200. As a freshman last year, one of the best hitters in the country. It was weird. Got off to a very sluggish start. He's on an absolute tear and is part of the reason they're in the position that they're in. So Gracia is a big one. Something else that Duke does particularly well is continued development with graduate transfers. So we talk about graduate transfers like in the context of NC State. Those guys were what they were, and they gave you what they were, and that was awesome for Wolfpack fans. What they do at Duke is a little bit different because sometimes they'll go over and pick off a guy from an Ivy League program who is thought to be a graduate player, but maybe has an extra year of eligibility. Ben Miller is who I'm talking about. Superstar at Penn, all conference, very good offensive player. Ben Miller leads the ACC in home runs.
Mm-hmm.
He's in his second year as a sort of graduate player at Duke because he just ended up with more eligibility. And oh, by the way, he's going to finish up with degrees from Penn and Duke. Not bad. But he's one of the oldest guys in the ACC. I think he's 24 years old. Plays a solid third base, and he's better than he was at Penn. I mean, there's from a developmental standpoint, there's a lot to be said for that. They've got a guy, Reed Easterly, who's another Ivy League transfer. He's been their best reliever. He's thrown the most innings of anybody on that team. Was not expected to be a key contributor in that way, but they work on developing players mid-season, preseason, postseason. Individual development is such a huge part of this program. It pays dividends. And yeah, they thought he was going to factor in and be a nice piece, but you get to the preseason and all of a sudden it's a week before opening day and they're like, wow, okay, this is a dude for us because of the strides that he has made. So I just love the job that Duke does with development. They had a guy who made an impression in the ACC championship last year, who's not there anymore. Zach Morris was a transfer from VMI. He was a very good player, second baseman at VMI, and he was better at Duke than he ever was there. It's just what they do year in and year out. And on top of that, they get good recruits like an AJ Gracia, and you mishmash all that together, and it's just a solid program. It really is. They are as sturdy a baseball program as anyone in the ACC now, and Chris Pollard's got so much to do with that.
Duke again headed to Athens, where Georgia is the host. Binghamton is also there. Oklahoma State is also there.
If I may, DG, Duke going to Athens, where they've had postseason success under Chris Pollard before. They won a regional there in 2022. So they can, and it is a hitter's park. Duke can hit with some pop. It could work out to their advantage again, being in Athens.
I don't know how much long distance travel matters in the NCAA baseball tournament there, but there are several manageable trips here, including Duke to Athens, Georgia. We'll get to ECU a little bit later. They just have to cross the state line and head to coastal Carolina, not too far away at all. Wake Forest in the western half of our state does go to Tennessee, just across another border. The Volunteers are the number 14 national seed. The other two squads at Tennessee will be Miami of Ohio and also Cincinnati. We also know the Tom Walter story at Wake Forest, right? This is a guy who coached certainly one of the best Wake Forest baseball teams of all time when he took the Deacons to the College World Series in 2023. This is 4 straight trips to the big dance for the Deacons. What makes this team special? What makes Tom Walter special? Because he has re-energized that program in a similar fashion that you described what Chris Pollard has done at Duke.
Yeah, this has been an interesting year for Wake Forest. They have so much talent. I think if you were to ask Demon Deacon fans, they've turned in a good year. And again, they're in a regional. But if you were to ask most of their most loyal fans, I think this year to this point has been a disappointment because sheerly of the potential, which is my answer to what makes them special. At their best, this is a very, very capable Wake Forest team. They, on the flip side, were last in the ACC this season in fielding percentage, and that cost them in some games. They are amongst the nation's leaders in strikeouts. Their pitching staff is, which is a good thing. They walk a lot of batters because what you get is this sort of give and take because they are such an appealing program to young pitchers and pitching prospects. They get guys with stuff, wipeout stuff. But as a former pitcher, the point of wipeout stuff is not to land it in the strike zone. It's to get swings and misses. Sometimes, I know more often than they would like, opposing batters are hip to that and they know to take, and they take good pitches. So it turns into this sort of Jekyll and Hyde situation where they're either grooving, the pitching staff is, or they have some warts and they walk a lot of batters, and then that creates rallies for the opposing team. It's been, I think if you were to ask Tom Walter, it's been probably a frustrating season in that regard. But, everybody's 0-0 is the expression starting at this point. So you can hone in on the potential and key in on the potential. Merrick Houston hits toward the top of the order. He's their starting shortstop. He's going to be a first-round MLB draft pick. He's in his third year with the program. He entered as this defensive dynamo, started at shortstop right away, bottom of the order guy. Offense has had an uptick every single year he's been there, including this year. Prior to this season, he put on 22 pounds of muscle. 22. And I had them on opening weekend, and he hit a couple that he obliterated home runs. So there's added power. The defense has taken a little bit of a hit, and I speculate just from knowing sort of like the throwing motion and seeing it. You put on 22 pounds of muscle, your body composition is totally different. And I think maybe there's just like a little bit of a learning curve with his new body, trying to figure out how to field, how to throw. It's not an alarming issue, I don't think, especially for their purposes in this postseason. Maybe more of an issue for a pro scout who's assigned a Houston assessment. But he's a fascinating player, fun to watch. They brought in a transfer, DG, that I think is the best pure hitter in the ACC. His name's Cade Lewis. He was the Big East Freshman of the Year at Butler last year. He's a line drive barrel machine. It doesn't matter where you throw it to him. It doesn't matter how it's moving, what direction, what kind of spin. He's going to get a barrel on it. He's going to hit it hard. Near 500 OPS, near 450 batting average, and he just crushes baseballs. Now, defense has been maybe a little bit of an issue for him. They found a spot at third, tried him out at first and in the outfield some, but he's that good of a bat. You got to get him in the lineup. He's a joy to watch, and they're going to have him presumably for another year after this. So that's something really to look forward to for Wake Forest fans. And again, the pitching staff is so deep and talented. I like it a lot. They've got guys via the transfer portal who not only have pitched at other places in the ACC before, but they've been Friday aces in the ACC before. Matt Bedford is a leverage guy for them out of the bullpen, transfer from Notre Dame, went to Omaha with Notre Dame as their Friday starter. In other versions of the Fighting Irish, he was like their swing reliever guy that they would put in when they needed stops. Griffin Green is another transfer, missed all of last season due to injury when he was with the Virginia Tech Hokies. Graduate, a guy that's been there. He was their Friday starter on maybe the best Virginia Tech baseball team of the past, 5 decades. So they've got bona fides all across that roster. And they're capable. It's just a matter of, do they put it all together and execute for a string long enough to have success in a regional and then a super and who knows, maybe Omaha.
Daron Vaught is joining us on the David Glenn Show. Remember to check out his stuff at D1 Baseball, also the ACC Baseball, etc. podcast. Last but not least, the East Carolina Pirates are the 5th and final team from the Old North State that will be in this NCAA baseball championship. Nobody is surprised, Daron, or few, if any, are surprised to see the Tar Heels in this event, the Deacons, the Devils, the Heels, to varying degrees. When I watched the Pirates at midseason this year, and we respect Cliff Godwin, of course, but if you put aside the COVID year, this is his 10th, we'll call it his 10th full season at ECU. He took them to the tournament 8 of his first 9 years, again, putting aside the 2020 COVID year. And the only mediocre record he had prior to this year was the 1 year he didn't end up in the NCAA tournament. So I'm watching the Pirates. We all know how Greenville and much of Eastern North Carolina rallies around that baseball program. And it just looked for a long time a lot more like the only other Cliff Godwin ECU team that did not make the NCAA tournament. Sure enough, heading into the American Athletic Tournament, they were I think they were below 500 in conference play, which has not happened at ECU in quite a while. They were not one of the top seeds. And yet, who's still standing? Who punches their ticket again? The American Athletic Conference champion, East Carolina. How did they figure it out? And as they head to a difficult challenge, the Pirates are only the number 3 seed. Those other schools, Heels, remember, 1 seed. The other 3 we mentioned are 2 seeds. The Pirates are a 3 seed, but they have to feel good about how they just played in winning yet another conference championship for Cliff Godwin, who's now got 5 regular season titles in his 10 full years there, 4 tournament titles, 5 American Athletic Conference Coach of the Year awards. I mean, this guy is so decorated. We often see his name on lists when an SEC vacancy comes up. What is it about this year's Pirates team that they figured out? And how dangerous do you think they are even as a 3 seed going on the road at Coastal Carolina?
I think being there is enough to um to be worried if you're another team and it's East Carolina. Like, look, this is coming into the season. They were picked to win the American, but that's almost, it was a benefit of the doubt pick, right? Until it doesn't happen. And there are other conferences in the mid-major ranks that are this way. Wright State has won another conference championship. And again, just as an example, there are some others, mid-major teams that dominate their conferences. We all knew coming into this season it was going to be different. It might not be different ostensibly in that the Pirates were going to maybe win another conference title, but like you said, 13 and 14 in conference competition. That is so unlike a Cliff Godwin Pirates team. I love this story because talent-wise, and again, respect to the guys for what they've put together. Obviously, you are of a certain ilk to be playing college baseball, so I don't necessarily mean it in this way, but it is not hard to see that I think it's the least talented team Cliff Godwin's ever had. So on the flip side, of all the great that we've seen out of Cliff Godwin as a coach, as the head coach at his alma mater at ECU, I think it's the best coaching job he's ever done. There are some stories that I love. His batting average leader, one of the better freshmen in mid-major baseball, Braden Burris, is one of them. He was named the conference tournament MVP or MOP, depending on how they assign that. Either way, he was the best player for the conference tournament. Burris's dad not only played at ECU, but was a teammate of Cliff Godwin's. Awesome. He is an ECU guy through and through. Really fun story. Ethan Norby, older brother Connor, now in the big leagues, also came through ECU's program. Norby has been a revelation for them on the mound. Somebody that I liked as a starting pitcher, but didn't love coming into the season. People might remember he had that 18 strikeout effort earlier in the year that got a lot of attention. He was very gritty in the conference tournament for them.
Unbelievable innings. Unbelievable innings.
And there's a sense of riding your guys with this program that worked out toward the end. And there's a belief. I think that's the other thing, like it's easy to get discouraged. And, you go to ECU, a lot of these guys grew up ECU baseball fans. Kind of similar to what I was talking about with Walker McDuffie at UNC. Like these are guys that dreamed of playing at ECU. Again, it's familial as per the last two examples. It's easy to get discouraged when it's not sort of your typical ECU team, but they never let up, and they got some production from places that it was really good timing. Really good timing throughout the conference tournament. They got that production. They did get a little bit of help in the American Conference tournament because UTSA got knocked out. So the far and away best team, UTSA, number 25 RPI, even this is a stolen bid because UTSA was going to be in no matter what as an at-large. So they lucked out a little bit, but Tulane has made noise in this tournament time and time again, and that's who they faced in the final. Tulane's an incredible baseball program, right? That has kind of had its lulls as of late. And a lot of that's due to the way that ECU's been, right? It's no longer Tulane dominating because it's been ECU dominating. So I love this story. I don't know how much left they've got in the tank, but I mean, you won't find me counting out a Cliff Godwin team anytime soon. And when it comes to postseason play, so I'm looking forward to it, especially with the draw that they got with Coastal Carolina. That should be super interesting.
Last thing for you, you mentioned Arkansas as one of the teams that you like most in this entire bracket. What do you think of the chances of our 5 North Carolina-based entries? Obviously, if you're a 3 seed like ECU, you're an underdog. If you're a 2 seed, I mean, baseball is a sport where plenty of 2 seeds not only win their region, but sometimes make the College World Series. And in Carolina's case, obviously, the Heels will be the favorite at the very least in the regional round, and maybe even in the super regional if they advance. What are other things for fans to look for as this big dance gets underway?
I think North Carolina is a legitimate national championship contender. I don't even know that I would have said that last year. I thought they were an Omaha team. I don't know that I was confident that they would win it all. It was a very talented team. I certainly was hoping that they would go as far as possible and succeed. And much like the other ACC teams, I just last year one of the main differences is there were obvious juggernauts, elite teams. Right? We've seen them the past several years. They don't always get to Omaha. I'm looking at you, Wolfpack fans, knocking off Arkansas on your way to a College World Series trip several years ago, but there's not that this year. Vandy is the number 1 overall seed. They're not even maybe my 3rd favorite SEC team when it's all said and done, but the resume is fitting of a number 1 overall seed. I think that, in addition to the balance of this North Carolina team, makes them a legitimate national championship contender. That's what they're reaching for. I think a team like Duke could get to Omaha. I think that's maybe best case scenario for them. If they win a regional, that's a rousing success of a season for the Blue Devils, especially considering they got off to a weird start. It was an interesting year for a lot of teams that you expected to be here, but it's just not been as linear as it normally is. And Duke's one of those teams. So yeah, winning a regional, that'd be perfectly fine for them. I know they see themselves as an Omaha contender. So the Duke staff, they want to kick down that door, so to speak, as Chris Pollard has alluded to time and time again. They want to kick down that door. They want to get the Blue Devils to Omaha for the first time in his tenure. Yeah, much like what I just said about Cliff Godwin applies to Elliott Avent. And I don't know, man. I like their draw. They certainly pitch well enough. They play good defense. Those things travel. You don't have to host to get to Omaha if you do those things well, and you get some timely hitting out of some characters across the lineup, and they're capable. It's just a matter of will it all come together. So I think NC State, Duke, possible Omaha teams. If you're a North Carolina fan, you feel really, really good about your team, and you should know you got a chance to win the whole shebang, which would be really cool because it's been a while since the ACC's gotten one.
Good summary, man. I hope your optimism ends up being accurate because it could make for one more exciting postseason here in the bold North State, as my friend Mike Waddell likes to call it. Great to see you. I hope to treat you to a round of golf here shortly if the weather will cooperate. Keep up the good work with D1 Baseball and also with the ACC Baseball, etc. podcast. I will see you off the air many, many, many times. Our love from the Glenn family to you and yours, of course, and thanks for the time on the David Glenn Show.
Of course. Appreciate the invite.
Appreciate you. Appreciate all of you across North Carolina and beyond for being with us today on the North Carolina Sports Network.